everyone, welcome back to my booktube channel. In this video I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I read in the month of June. June was actually a really good reading month for me. It was also Pride month, so I did try to read a few books that were written by LGBTQIA plus authors. Among these books there are a couple of favorites and I'm going to talk to you about all of them, but not in any specific order. One of the books out of this list I actually read in the month of May, but then I didn't do a May reading wrap up because I literally only read one book in the month of May, right? So I thought, let me just add this book to the June reading pile. I know this is a much anticipated video. If you count graphic novels, I have read 8 books in the month of June. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book I read was Heartstopper. This is a graphic novel that I've been seeing wherever I go. I decided to just pick up volume 1 and I really enjoyed it. It was unputdownable. I read this entire book in one sitting on the way back from the bookshop to my home. Literally devoured it. There are 3 other novels about the same characters that feature in this one. So you can see here that the illustrations are quite nice and easy to read. This is also a Netflix adaptation. I was keen to kind of read the book first before going into the adaptation. So I decided, let me give this a shot, and I really enjoyed it. Then I wanted to know what happens because this is a story about 2 boys, one of whom is gay and the other person is bisexual, and he doesn't really know that he is, but then he kind of finds out, right, in the course of this story. Charlie Spring is the protagonist, and it's a really sweet story about these 2 meeting in high school and then everything that follows after that. If you like high school stories and if you watch a lot of those Netflix series set in high schools, stories about teenagers growing up, the kind of things that they go through in general, about friendships and all of that, I think you'll really enjoy this set of 4 books. It gets pretty serious even though it deals with serious issues in a very light-hearted and digestible manner. One thing that it does talk about at a later stage in the 4-part series is anorexia, the eating disorder. So that's just a trigger warning for that. There are bits about bullying mentioned here as well, but I think overall it's a very realistic take on, life in general in high school, as well as for people from the LGBTQIA community. Pretty realistic portrayal, makes you want to laugh at times, and also there were moments in this book that I kind of got teary-eyed. So that's how impactful was the storytelling. That's how much I enjoyed the storytelling, and the drawings were lovely as well. So really felt for the characters and they became very real in my eyes. Would highly recommend reading this. I think I rated this series 5 out of 5. But I think personally, out of the 4 books in the series, I enjoyed the first one. The second one is kind of like, I just wanted to know what happened. Not too many days are covered in this novel. It's more like a few months, and then the characters move out of high school and then they go to university and things like that. So you really want to know what happens in this relationship. It's a very, very sweet story and makes you want to give the person near you a big hug kind of novel. So that's the kind of treat this is. So definitely light reading. This really helped me get out of my May reading slump where I read just 1 book. I really enjoyed the 3rd book, I think, in the series, and the 4th one was my favorite. And I think there's going to be a 5th one coming out as well. So I'm really excited to read Heartstopper 5. I don't know when that's out, but sometime this year, I'm assuming. This book came out quite earlier on, but I think it only gained popularity once it was adapted to the Netflix drama for some reason, and now everyone's talking about it and people can't get enough of it. I was glad to also find out about this in the course of this tsunami of people finding out about Heartstopper and gushing over how great the series is. I'm usually a little wary of approaching these hyped books, but then this did not disappoint me, and this was like totally worth my time. So would highly recommend it to people who want to try reading it. That was that. I also read The Transition Baby at Pride month and I wanted to read it. And this is about a trans person living their life along with 2 other people. One of them is also trans and the other one is a cis woman. I have already talked about this in another video where what I felt about this book, try to make sense of the things that happen. So I'm going to link that up here so you can go check that out. Now for the other books. Before I come to my 2 favorites, I just want to quickly talk about Mrs. Death, which I read in May. This is the only book I read, and this unfortunately put me into a reading slump, which means that I didn't really enjoy this book, right? I'm someone who's really intrigued about death and any narrative where this gets personified. I remember reading that novel where death is a narrator that was set during World War II. I forget the name. I'm going to probably put the name and type over here. That is a novel I really enjoyed reading, and I was hoping something like that would come up in this, but this was a largely forgettable story. Like, I didn't have any takeaways from reading this novel. That's why I'm going to rate it 2 out of 5 stars, right? So if you're planning to skip this, that's not such a bad idea, and if you want to just not read it, you're not missing out on anything. It was really difficult to get through in the sense I wasn't having much of a draw. This novel didn't pull me in There was nothing that made me want to continue reading it, and it was an effort not to DNF this book. Those are my thoughts on Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. I like this one line here, which I've marked. To imagine your own death is to imagine that this will all end. To visualize the death of your elders, your parents, your siblings, your children, your lover, your world. To imagine these disasters should make you try harder. In theory, it should make you try harder to be a better person. I understand that there are a lot of philosophical things here that try to make a point about how death is a good thing, and to know that you're going to die at some point makes you want to be the best version of yourself throughout your life, and you're always on this journey in life to kind of get better. Like, if you're looking for a book with a plot, then this book will not be that book, and it will disappoint you, because this is about a character named Wolf, a troubled young writer who is enthralled by her stories, and she begins to write Mrs. Death's memoirs. And I have read a lot of memoirs and I've enjoyed them. I love memoirs, but this didn't feel like a memoir at all for some reason. That point was entirely lost on me. I'm probably going to pass this on to somebody who would enjoy such a book. Now, coming to the best part of the video, 3 books that I rated very highly. I'm going to talk about these in the order that I read them. So the first book that I absolutely enjoyed and rated 5 out of 5 stars is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, if you haven't picked this up, what are you even doing? Pick up this book, because firstly, the writing style, and secondly, the premise. I think it's super exciting to write about a character that you might just not get too much information about, and you might have encountered them in your life, maybe in the newspapers, or you don't have access to their personal lives. But if you had the ability to think up and imagine what their lives might actually be like, and get into the details with your imagination, and that's exactly what Taylor Jenkins Reid does, and she does really well. This book really made me want to know more about the character, and this is about an actress, right? So there's this actress who is really popular in the 50s, and narration is really interesting. This is also a Pride Month book, by the way. I found it done really well, and like, there were no loopholes for me. This was so exciting. It was a real page turner. I couldn't put this down. So this is about this woman who married about 7 times in her life. She married different men. She's an actress. She's very famous. She's very beautiful, insanely beautiful, right? She's very attractive, insanely attractive. This is about her life. So throughout her life, she lives a very secretive life. Nobody really knows anything about her relationships. Also, paparazzi wasn't as clever as it is these days. Back in the day, so they didn't really know much, right? You could just break into Hollywood by all sorts of means. You didn't have to do the straight path like everybody else follows, the hard work and all that. This is about Evelyn Hugo, and it's about how she gets into Hollywood, but more importantly, her 7 husbands. Who were they? And what kind of role did they play in her life? Why did she marry so many people? And what was the real motivation behind like officially becoming the wife of each of these people? Is that what propelled her career forward, or was there something else? Were there other motivations? Really enjoyed reading this. Real page turner. I absolutely thought every little thing that was included in this novel, there was a reason why it was included, and it really helped propel the story forward, right? Very much felt like a biography. So this is about a girl who gets enlisted to start interviewing Evelyn Hugo for the magazine that she works for. This girl is literally pulled out of obscurity. Nobody knows this reporter until she gets this request from Evelyn coming out of the blue saying, hey, I'm now quite old and I would like you to come and interview me because I want to write my autobiography but publish it posthumously. Right, so that's the job that she gets entrusted with. This reporter is also quite curious as to why she's been selected out of the blue. And then it gets really interesting because it's not just the stories about Evelyn and her husband, but this reporter also has something in her life that could potentially entangle her own history with Evelyn's, right? I'm going to try really hard not to give you any spoilers, but really, to read this book, it's executed so well. Great for book club discussions. I did try to read Daisy Jones and the Six earlier. That's also a very unique book in terms of the format, but I think this one worked a lot better for me. Also actually Google actresses who had more than 7 husbands, and I think Elizabeth Taylor popped up. But I wanted to go and read up about Elizabeth Taylor's life and figure out whether that was the basis of Taylor Jenkins Reid writing a book like this. So super interesting, opens up a lot of portals for exploration. Great pick for Pride Month as well. I feel like I can rant about this book for a really long time, but I think this video will get really long, so I'm going to put this aside now. But watch out for my update on Instagram. I might just post about this book shortly. On Instagram, I'm known as Bookish Bulletin, so do follow me over there as well if you want updates on my reading. The next book that I read is The Girl Who Couldn't Read by John Harding, and this is a sequel to Florence and Giles, a book that I read last year. I read this book for Halloween because it's a perfect time for reading gothic fiction, and this book, it was in fact better than the first novel. I really enjoyed The Girl Who Couldn't Read, perhaps more than I enjoyed Florence and Giles, right? It's about this man who impersonates someone else who's actually died on a train wreck, right? This is about him in an asylum, and he meets a girl there who doesn't know how to read, and he takes her up as an experiment that he wants to, try out some methods in, using moral treatment, morally okay ways of improving the health of mentally ill patients, right? He wants to cure her and make her someone who's able to read. That's the basic premise, but there's so many layers. It's a fast-paced book, it's unputdownable, it's a page-turner, and you really need to pay attention very closely at everything that's happening in order to be able to make sense of all the twists and turns, the unexpected things that happen. There are classic characters that are tropes, like, the warden, who's like the head of the psychiatric hospital. There is the man who runs the hospital, who has very outdated ways of handling mentally ill patients. The narrator is someone who potentially steals the identity of someone else, right? So he's impersonating someone. He's not really who he says he is, right? That gives the story a very sinister angle, and I think it's better you read Florence and Giles before you read this book. It fills in a lot of the gaps, and it gets you thinking about the first book. What really happened there? What was the first book anyway? Definitely The Girl Who Couldn't Read is far more amazing. If you like books by John Burnside, like The Dumb House, and other books that I've recommended previously, I think you'll enjoy this one as well. It is dark, it is gothic, it's sinister, it's a thriller full of suspense, a lot of twists, turns. I'm sure it'll not disappoint you. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. The ending was absolutely fab. Feels really good when a novel that is throwing a lot of things in different directions and you don't know where the plot could finally lead up to, but then you read the end and then all of those things make perfect sense. It's a really good feeling for the reader, right? So that was The Girl Who Couldn't Read. And I very adventurously did something very brave. My final book that I read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This was a spontaneous decision. Never thought I would actually read this book, but then I did. And I felt brave enough to read this because I previously read another book that was very similar in vein to this. And then I thought, if that didn't scare me, then this won't. But then perhaps I was slightly wrong, because there was a moment when I was reading this in my balcony and then my husband comes and just puts his hand on my shoulder and I'm like, I jumped because there was something going on in this novel that like totally had my attention wrapped like around it. So I literally jumped. So yes, this book is the kind of book that will scare you. Then again, it's a really good book to think about and to maybe read at some point and to discuss with people, because there are so many things that potentially happened or did not happen in this book and you want to really piece things together, right? So there's this feeling of claustrophobia that is there throughout this novel, right from the beginning till the end. This is by Ian Reid, who is a Canadian author. This is his debut novel, but it's done really well. He's someone who wrote non-fiction in the past, but he then decided to write fiction, and I think he didn't fail at the attempt. This is a book that is very experimental in nature. I started making notes as I went along and I started responding to this book. There were so many things in here that I was like, but then why is this happening? So it felt like a puzzle. It really is a puzzle because there's so many things that are happening. The writing is going in all sorts of directions and you're like, but I need to know, and I need to know where this story is going. You put yourself into the narrator's head, feel the same sense of entrapment that they feel. This sense is there pervading throughout the novel. So I have written so many notes actually. I wasn't too surprised or shocked by the end. A lot of readers were shocked, but I don't think I was that shocked. This is a book about a man and a woman who are traveling. They are in a relationship together, but it's a fresh relationship. So it's just been 6 weeks. And then he's taking her to his parents' house to meet his parents, right? That's where the book opens. She's in this car and they're driving and it's desolate and the roads are never ending and it's going to be snowing. So that's the setting. So I read this in one sitting, okay? And I think that's exactly what the author wanted people to do. And I think that's the best way you can kind of read this book. The ending was really interesting. And so were the symbols that kept recurring, the whole feeling of claustrophobia which was there throughout. I don't think I've read a book that was so claustrophobic. Like I had to actually physically breathe in and out to remind myself that I'm not in the narrator's head, but I'm outside of it, existing separately. That was this novel, a unique book, and there's a part in it which I think is just one sentence repeating over and over again for 3 pages. Definitely worth a reread, and I think I do need to reread this from another. If you're looking for a book that is like a movie and where you will be kind of challenged as a reader, and it will make you want to pay attention very closely to everything that's happening. And if you are looking for a book like that, then definitely pick this up. This was 4 out of 5 stars for me. Those were the books I read in June. I'm very happy with the reading that I've done, and I'm looking forward to the 7th month of the year, July. Let me know in the comments what you're currently reading. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And also don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because that's what motivates me to make more content and to continue reading all those books out there, so that you don't have to sift through the rubble and actually find a good book. I'm here to tell you what the good books are, so just stick around for more book recommendations. I'll see you soon with another bookish video. Bye.